Emergency PolitiCast, that can be the way to describe it. A brief version of what we've been doing on Fridays. I think the big thing here is this Vance pick for vice president. This news just coming in a couple hours ago. It had been kind of the final threesome. It went from, it seemed like eight candidates that had been requested materials down to three. The three were Burgum, Vance, and then Rubio. Vance is the choice. Is this the front runner, the choice that you thought most likely, or was it still up in the air for you until we got to this point?
Well, everything that I had read is that it was really focused more on two people. That it was really going to be JD Vance and then uh, Governor Burgum from North Dakota. I think that Marco Rubio, he probably has set himself up well for a position in the cabinet if there is a second Trump term. But everything that lately it had been leaning very, very heavily towards JD Vance.
I'll say that, similarly, I thought that was going to be Burgum probably for about the last month or two. That was one of the names that was being touted and speculated for a long time. Then there was Tim Scott, Lee Stefanik. I mean, we've been through the ringer, and these poor candidates that were potential Veep nominees were going through the ringer. But yesterday, when I saw a report that was indicating that Vance was in Ohio, I believe he was just back home with his kids, and then all of a sudden there was police support and escorts, and the Governor DeWine said that, oh, that's simply just a precaution out of what happened on Saturday. I was like, oh, okay, I'm sure it is, but also I was curious if perhaps that was a bigger strategy behind that. So I'm not surprised today when all of the VPs were being told, excuse me, I guess like potential VPs were being told and released to the public that they were not the nominee. It felt a little bit like Jerry Springer or Maury, like, you are not the father. And so I was kind of expecting Vance at the end there.
It was The Apprentice, really, right? It was the choice. It's like, hey, I got these eight
Tired.
or so, and I'm gonna eventually go down to the one. And
Exactly.
and I think with that too, it seemed like the most interesting thing with him could be the fact that he was not pro-Trump in 2016. He wasn't during those first few years, and it seemed like he slowly started to drift closer, and that culminated in an endorsement from Trump in a crowded primary field in a Republican primary in the Senate a couple years ago that really set Vance apart from the rest of the Republicans there. Do you think this plays into his message of unity, which I know he's talked about a lot since the debate on Saturday, but really we've seen a different type of Trump from the debate onwards, and maybe even the weeks before that debate?
A couple things. I think one, you've seen 2024 Trump is a much more disciplined candidate. He is using more set speeches. He still goes off script, but he is generally focusing on main themes. He certainly was a rule follower during the debate and actually turned out really well for him. Joe Biden got hung by his own rules. And look, with someone like JD Vance, this is someone who in 2016, when he came out with his best-selling book, Hillbilly Elegy, he was anti-Trump. I mean, he called Trump an idiot. He even called them American Hitler. But over the last 2 years, I don't think you have a stronger member of the United States Senate for Donald Trump than JD Vance. And I think that Trump's pick boiled down to one thing and one thing only: loyalty. JD Vance has proven himself to be a loyal foot soldier. And because JD Vance will likes and relishes being an attack dog, it will allow Donald Trump to be more of the unifier that I think, since the unfortunate events of Saturday, I guess fortunate events that they weren't successful, it allowed Donald Trump to be the unifier and JD Vance to just come in and be very, very aggressive and contrastive to the Biden-Harris agenda.
When Trump's talking about unifying the country, unifying the party, JD Vance is definitely not the first person who comes to mind to be able to help do that. Uh, to Matt's point here, yes, he did say very terrible things about Trump in the past. So has Rubio. So have a lot of people who still come out to support him. I mean, most recently, Nikki Haley, who was his last opponent left in the primary, who is now going to be speaking at the convention tomorrow and receive that invitation from the Trump team. So No, I mean, I don't think that Vance is the candidate to unify folks. I think if they really did want to unify people in the way that Trump has been saying the last few days, I think Glenn Youngkin would have made more sense. I think a Nikki Haley would have made more sense. But I agree. I think that he wants an attack dog. I think he wants someone who is going to always have his back, especially because he and Pence obviously did not end on good terms. So he wants someone he knows he can trust and rely on, and that makes sense to me why he was the one that was chosen.
Yeah, and Will, I do want to add something too. I think that JD Vance does bring something very, very valuable to the table. We know that the swing states of, particularly Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, they're going to be very, very important states. And there are pockets, particularly rural pockets of those states, that JD Vance can speak to because he lived it. I mean, he was born in West Virginia. He lived in Ohio. He has written very profoundly in Hillbilly Elegy about the self-destructive culture of rural America. And I think that in many ways he can go into some of these communities that have historically voted Democrat because they've been dependent upon the social safety net and say, you have been left behind. Government has forgotten you. Let me tell you a better way. Here's what we envision. And I think that, believe it or not, JD Vance's selection is going to open up a pocket of voters to Trump. And you don't need a lot of voters in these states that are going to make a big difference come November.
Yeah, in last couple questions for you. The first one I want to focus on is what you just talked about. I think I have to do probably like a binge watch. I think the movie's on Netflix, Hillbilly Elegy. I have to go watch that, and then also go read the book as well to get a better sense of everything. But I think one of the interesting things that he brings, as you had mentioned, is growing up with issues that seem like they've expanded from the Rust Belt states into a lot of other states across the country, particularly overdoses and fentanyl overdoses and drug overdoses. I know that he's an attack dog, but do you think he's eloquent enough to speak to that? And you think the message spreads from the Midwest outwards?
Go ahead, Brittany.
Sure. So I think he brings something unique to the campaign because he has had those lived experiences, right? And I was watching some folks talk about this on the news, and they were saying like perhaps he's not the most articulate in being able to describe really intricate and intense high issues, but that he's going to be able to be a good surrogate in trying to bring these issues forward in a way that the average American can understand. And I'm interested to see if how that shapes out. I do think that he does bring a unique perspective, and that's going to be important. I don't know how many, I don't know how many folks Trump's going to need to sway. I know that he's been leading the polls more recently. It's still going to be a really tight race. And ultimately, though, I will say that I think that the selection of JD Vance does galvanize Democrats. They were hoping that it would be JD Vance because they have things that they can do oppo on, like all his previous statements. I should also say that you're allowed to grow and your feelings are allowed to change. But they're going to be hitting on him, and we'll see how that all turns out.
Yeah, I will add along what Brittany said is JD Vance is incredibly gifted speaker. I mean, this is a man that grew up in gripping poverty. Spent a lot of time with his grandparents because he had a single mom, enlisted in the Marine Corps because he really didn't know what he wanted to do. Did his time in the Marines, graduated college, went to Yale Law School. So clearly he is a very, very smart person, and he will be able to handle himself more than adeptly when debating Kamala Harris. Which he will hopefully get the opportunity to do at least once. But I think more than once would be a long shot. But again, he's able to talk to people about that lived experience that not a lot of politicians have. And I think that is going to be incredibly valuable. And it's a nice contrast with Donald Trump, who obviously didn't grow up in those experiences, but can relate to those constituencies on a much different level. So I think it's a good choice. And look, in terms of the Democrats, whomever Trump chose, the Democrats were going to be able to attack, whether it was Marco Rubio or Doug Burnham or Nikki Haley or Tim Scott. There, I mean, that's just the nature of what politics is all about. So, I mean, I think that JD Vance is he's 39 years old. He's gonna say, bring it on. I got broad shoulders. Give me your best.
Well, that was to me what was the most striking contrast when we talk about bringing someone in, right? Is what you just mentioned, 39 years old versus what the rest of that ticket looks like and seems more energetic and youthful. There's not too much gray in the beard, and even next to Kamala Harris, and I'm sure we'd end up seeing a debate there. There seems to be a difference there too in age from the two of them as well. I know that she kind of presents more in the mama role, the mother role that she's been taking on. She doesn't seem to have as much energy. She's very thoughtful about her answers versus him, who I think would maybe perhaps approach a debate or a comparison between the two as more of, as you mentioned, as the two of you mentioned, the attack dog style that he presents. How much does the 39-year-old, that youthful presence, bring into to this situation?
I mean, it's definitely interesting, that's for sure. Like you were saying, it's two 80-year-olds basically running against each other. And now you have someone who I'd say the vice president is obviously young, especially when we're talking about a political capacity, but you have someone who's not even 40 yet. I mean, that's absolutely incredible. But I guess there's an argument to be made is that does he have the wisdom to hold the office of the vice president? He hasn't run many campaigns, and be running for vice president is a huge undertaking. I think that is going to perhaps be one of the things that people are paying attention to. Maybe it's a criticism, maybe it's not. We'll see how he does. He might just be a naturally gifted campaigner and be able to rise to the occasion. However, some of these folks have been running for office. I mean, look at Biden. Biden's been running for office since before JD Vance was ever a senator, right? He was a senator by the time he was 30. So a lot of these folks have a lot of experience under their belts, but I do think that people are looking for new leadership, and I think that Vance might be able to bring some folks into the tent that way.
What a reinforcement of the Trump message about the failed political class, that you have someone who is a fresh new face running on the ticket with Donald Trump to go to Washington and clear out the swamp. That's the message that they're going to make. And JD Vance can say, I am not a professional politician. I graduated from law school. I became a venture capitalist in San Francisco. I made some money. I returned back to Ohio to my roots, and I ran for the United States Senate. I authored bipartisan legislation with my Democratic colleague Sherrod Brown on the Palestine Railroad tragedy that happened. I've been very outspoken for the poor and forgotten middle class in rural America and middle and rural America. Again, I think that this is a brilliant pick by Donald Trump. It opens up so many doors, and that if young voters are looking at a ticket with a two old gray-haired white guys and a almost 60-year-old Kamala Harris, to put a 40-year-old in there, it'll be a stark contrast.
Yeah, well, I mean, you could also make the argument there, half Trump's age, but he already had more political experience than when Trump ran the first time. So, there's that he can put as a feather in his cap when it comes to that experience argument. But yes, sounds good. We appreciate having both of you on once again. Anything else that you'd like to add there that you think we didn't touch on?
No, I say this week's convention it should be must-see TV if you want to get current on what's happening on the 2024 presidential election. And I think that you're going to see a noticeable change in tone from the Republicans based on what happened on Saturday. And I think that the Republicans should expect to see a really nice bounce out of the convention.
Sounds good, and we'll have Brittany to report back on it at the end of the week after.
Yeah, I would say have a blast, Brittany. Enjoy Milwaukee. We do want a full report.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.